love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on Rock Sport Radio.
And welcome to Pole Position, the motorsport show here on Rock Sport Radio. It's Andy Alston with you alongside Adam Todd, broadcasting live on DAB digital radio across central Scotland, online and on TuneIn. And on the show this week, Mercedes hard to beat as Ferrari feel the heat. Moffat makes history as touring car title battle is down to 3. Tanak wins his third in a row, but is Ogier about to go? And has the Riders' title all but gone as MotoGP heads to Aragon? All this and more on Pole Position. Now, Sebastian Vettel's hopes of winning this season's championship suffered another blow at the Singapore Grand Prix last weekend after Lewis Hamilton claimed his 7th win of the season. Now, that result means that Hamilton has a 42-point lead at the top of the championship with just 6 races left to go. And Adam, that lap in qualifying, never mind the race, the lap in qualifying from Lewis Hamilton was absolutely incredible.
It certainly was. It was just terrific from Hamilton, a full 3/10 quicker than Max Verstappen and 6/10 quicker than his title rival Sebastian Vettel. So what a marker that was to put down in the Saturday, especially when everybody was expecting the Ferraris to come out all guns blazing in Singapore and put in a good qualifying performance. It was the Mercedes, that a track they've not really gone well at the past, and Lewis Hamilton delivers that, and that was a real killer blow to Ferrari on the Saturday before the racing even got underway.
And then in the race itself, Adam, Hamilton was just, for me, he seemed to be just controlling the race at the front. You know, in that early stint as well, he was controlling the pace quite nicely. He was keeping the Verstappen and Vettel at bay. And, you know, Verstappen had a few nibbles, don't get me wrong, but it just felt like Hamilton was just looking so comfortable out there. Yeah, well, in modern day Formula 1, it's so difficult to overtake on street tracks. So Lewis Hamilton really did the hard work on the Saturday with that sensational qualifying lap. And you're right, Lewis Hamilton just controlling that pace out at front. It was just a few of the back markers, I can't remember which lap it was on, but it was Romain Grosjean, you know, with these blue flags. Charlie Whiting actually apologised to Lewis Hamilton after the Grand Prix for it, and that really allowed Max Verstappen to close up. And you know, I almost half expected Verstappen to maybe just put one down the inside and then see what happened, because you've got to remember as well, it's a dangerous situation for Lewis Hamilton, because Max Verstappen has nothing to lose. He's not fighting for a championship, he's just wanting to win as many races as he can between now and the end of the season, whereas Lewis Hamilton still had to think about winning, not only winning the Grand Prix but also his championship hopes. So with Hamilton and Mercedes looking very strong last weekend, where does not just Sebastian Vettel but Ferrari go from here? Well, I'm delighted to welcome back James Eagles from the Checkered Flag to Pole Position. And James, great to speak with you again on the show. Would you say that Vettel's hopes of winning this championship are over now, or am I maybe speaking too soon?
Oh, well, first of all, thanks very much for the introduction. It's nice to be back on, and I hope the two of you are well. It's not over, because 40 points, say if there's a finish for Hamilton, just like Malaysia a couple of years ago, and Vettel does win that. It's down to 15 points, and all of a sudden it looks, on again and pretty close. But it will be difficult. Mercedes have had good reliability, apart from probably Austria, you'd say, this season, and Ferrari just keep on slipping up. So it's difficult to see a way back, but it's not impossible.
But James, were you surprised by Ferrari's lack of pace last weekend? Because, Vettel was, over half a second behind Hamilton in qualifying. And yes, fair play to Hamilton. His lap was sensational, don't get me wrong. But, at this stage in the season, James, it's a real concern for me that Ferrari don't seem to have that edge at the moment.
I'm not sure it was a question that they didn't have the pace. I think Raikkonen said that they did have the speed, but they didn't have the chance to use it with Singapore's sort of track nature and being stuck in traffic. And also Vettel hit the wall for the second free practice 2 in a row as well, which might have dented his confidence. That's nothing to do really with the speed of the car, but it does affect a driver's confidence to hit the wall, especially on a track in Singapore where if you hit the wall once, the walls start to close up on you, just like Monaco, and it's very difficult to get out of that mindset. But I still believe that they have the best car. It's just a number of errors where they're shooting themselves in the foot, be it the strategists or the drivers themselves. I think you could put the Italian failure on the drivers for separate incidents. But this one I think is firmly on the strategists, and it was decided weeks ago when they chose their tyres for this race.
Yeah, but James, a lot of the talk after Singapore has been on that pit wall and the strategists, and Vettel, of course, wasn't very happy at qualifying as well. But I just wonder, James, when you watch the Ferraris warming up their cars, warming up the tyres in comparison to Mercedes, Ferrari seem to be quite aggressive the way they do it, whereas Mercedes, Hamilton and Bottas, they seem to be much more calm and measured when they're bringing their car up to temperature. That maybe suggests to me that Ferrari have a few difficulties getting that car up to full optimum conditions.
Yeah, they are kinder on their tyres in comparison to Mercedes, which is why Vettel was able to do something like 45 laps on the Ultras in the race, even though he was nursing them quite a lot. But Hamilton's outlap was, as you said, extremely slow, and I haven't heard about Bottas's attempt, but I presume it was the same. And it's because Mercedes have this issue, and it's why they're so good in the wet, that they can get temperature into the tyres very quickly, maybe too much temperature at points. And Ferrari, it's a question of finding the right gap. Vettel has had issues with them putting him out in the wrong place of the track at the wrong time in traffic, or in the case of Monza, not in traffic, and that's why he felt that he didn't get pole. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I would play in the race had they put the right tyres on Vettel. I think on softs he'd have been able to attack at least Verstappen, maybe not Hamilton. I think he was pretty much in a class of his own last weekend.
It's so strange though, James, isn't it? Because when we think back to Austria, where Mercedes had that double retirement, Sebastian Vettel then going on to win at Silverstone, I got the impression that was the momentum had well and truly swung in Ferrari's favour, and the big question for me at the time was, what do Ferrari do differently to ensure that they don't collapse in the second half of the season the way they did in 2017? But here we are, Vettel now trailing Hamilton once again in the championship standings, and I just wonder, how does he get himself back into that kind of winning mindset again? Yes, he got Spa as well, of course, but it just seems for me that Hamilton's the driver with the confidence and with the momentum behind him at the moment.
Well, there's only one thing he can do: try and put it behind him and go to Japan, a track which he likes, put in the best performance he possibly can, and try to get a win. I think Ferrari stand a decent chance of winning in Japan if they can hook everything together and Vettel keeps his head. I don't think Raikkonen will really threaten anymore, even though you could argue that he might say, well, I haven't got a contract with you next year, I might as well have a go. But I think he will play the team game and think of Vettel's championship if he gets the chance. But there's nothing really that he can do. He drove really well, I thought, last weekend, apart from probably the qualifying where he ran wide a few times. But in the race, I think he did the best job he could. He used his battery very well to get past Verstappen just before that safety car, and was, again, strategy hindered him and put him behind Verstappen. I don't know why they decided to pit him when Hamilton was putting in purple lap after purple lap.
James, Fernando Alonso was in great form last weekend with a 7th place finish. Do you think if he were at Ferrari at the moment, they would maybe be in a better position in the championship standings compared to Vettel? Because some people, you mentioned Raikkonen there and him not having a contract for 2019 with Ferrari. You know, do you think maybe Vettel just sat back a little bit, and if Alonso were in there, he could have really galvanised things at Maranello?
I think, to be honest, I think with Alonso, the comments he makes, and particularly the way he left Ferrari, would have the opposite effect, and they clearly don't like criticism, public criticism. It's something that Stefano Domenicali said on the F1 podcast a couple of weeks ago, that Michael Schumacher say never openly criticised the team, even when their mistake led to him breaking his leg at Silverstone. He still refused to publicly condemn them for the error, and Vettel has at times had nibbles at them in the public. Alonso did as well. So I'm not sure that's exactly the right way to go, and you can never really tell what's going to happen in Fernando Alonso's career. Something always goes wrong at some point.
Hi James, Adam here. Red Bull's Max Verstappen finishing second as we mentioned, and that's a great result for him because he seemed to be struggling with engine issues throughout the weekend. Tell us a bit more about them.
I think he had a terrific weekend, as you said, drove perfectly, and had any other driver but Hamilton been in that Mercedes, he probably would have got pole and won the race. But he suffered with a false neutral, and the car was jumping about all over the place, particularly at low revs, and his pit stop, it went straight to second gear from neutral, and he had to get the car booted in second gear, then click down to first. And he was contending with Vettel at the time as well, while still probably having that issue in the back of his mind. So he did very well on a track that's very demanding mentally and physically enough, without having gearbox issues and drivability issues. And he will probably make Red Bull wish for the Honda contract to come slightly sooner, as drivability is one of their famed points and always has been.
And James, Valtteri Bottas was fourth, but he was well off his teammates' pace all weekend. Why do you think that was the case, and do you think Mercedes will be concerned by that?
I would be slightly concerned if I was Mercedes, particularly with Toto Wolff saying, well, why isn't Esteban Ocon got to drive? People have gone back on their promises. He could easily have made the step up to Mercedes. He's done very well at Force India. And Bottas has stumbled ever since, well, really Austria last year. I think his issue here was he just used up his tyres too quickly, and then in the maybe turbulence, the exacerbated turbulence, with the concrete walls from Hülkenberg's car, that's really what he struggled with, and he had to back off and just try and keep Raikkonen and Ricciardo behind him. But there was a big gap to Hamilton, just as there was in the Red Bull battle as well, and that would be slightly worrying, particularly if you're going into a next season where Leclerc's going to be at Ferrari, and it's unknown whether he'll really take the fight to Vettel or whether he'll back off. But I imagine he'll be very solid, and you've got, arguably the best in the business at the moment, but Bottas alongside, who's really struggling for confidence and form at the moment.
And Daniel Ricciardo, he could only manage 6, which was disappointing for him considering his track record in Singapore. Do you feel it was his poor qualifying that cost him?
Yes, I think that's what he said, that it was lost in qualifying. He was about 0.6 down to Verstappen, further 0.3 back to Hamilton. And as good as Daniel Ricciardo is and as brave as he is, there's not that time to make up in Singapore without a big incident, just like at the start last year.
James, one of the main talking points from the race last weekend was the collision between the two Force Indias. Do you think that Sergio Perez was fully at fault there? Yes,
I think Perez had one of his races where no one really knows what's going through his mind. Particularly like the battle with Sorokin as well. Like, you moan about someone defending really well. Sorokin used the tools that he had, because he can't particularly corner very well in that Williams. So the only thing he's got is the battery power and the Mercedes power. And the way to complain about dangerous driving is not to overtake someone, then run into the side of them.
An interesting thing about this as well, James, is this isn't the first time that both of these Force India drivers have collided with each other, or indeed other drivers. Do you think the way the team is managing Perez and Ocon is the right way to go?
I think it will turn into the right way, because Otmar Safnauer said that they might bring back the post-Belgium sort of rules, saying you can't race each other. We've got to look at the overall picture. They've got a lot of ground to make up. Of course, they lost all their points. And this weekend, they both thought could have scored good points. And with Haas struggling and Renault scraping the barrel in terms of being 8th and 10th, they could have made up a lot of ground on the teams that they will want to be around come Abu Dhabi.
And James, you mentioned Esteban Ocon there about the Bottas speculation at Mercedes. Do you think there's any chance of Esteban Ocon remaining on the grid for 2019?
Probably more out of hope, yes. But looking at it realistically, it does look a little dodgy. I mean, there's talk of the fact that if Stroll leaves the team, Kubica comes in, but I don't know if that's just until the end of the 2018 season, and that doesn't run over to 2019. I'm not quite sure of the full details on that. And if that is the case and Kubica gets the drive, then it's going to be a nice story, but it'll be a shame to see someone who's only just turned, 22 a few days ago, and a star of the Mercedes Academy, and who's done really well in a very short time in F1 out of a drive.
James, it almost feels quite similar to the Jean-Eric Vergne situation a few years ago, where we had a talented driver unable to secure a seat in Formula 1. But if you were Ocon, James, what would your options be for 2019 at the moment?
It's a difficult choice, particularly when you've had 2 contracts already. In the case of Vergne, I'm not sure he had a drive anywhere else for the next year, but Ocon reportedly had contracts from McLaren and Renault on the table, and it's a tough pill to swallow. I think his old, or someone else who like Vergne and maybe like Ocon fell by the wayside, and Pascal Wehrlein has gone somewhere else and might end up at Toro Rosso. So it could be an option, but we're getting to a point where 20 cars in Formula 1 is not enough to give all the drivers that deserve a seat, and maybe some that can bring, whilst talent, but can also bring money to aid privateer teams. Look at Sorokin. Just the seats, there's not enough seats to go around, and I don't think he'll be satisfied with a testing role. Mercedes are coming into Formula E soon, and I just wonder whether he might head that charge if he can't go into Formula 1.
And just finally, James, you mentioned there Ocon maybe not being happy about a testing role, but do you think if you were to just step out the spotlight for 2019, he could perhaps do a bit of a Kevin Magnussen almost and come back into the frame in 2020? If perhaps with another team, doesn't necessarily have to be affiliated with Mercedes.
Yeah, again, it's difficult. The Mercedes affiliation is tough because he's also got George Russell breathing down his neck, who's doing very well in F2 and may not, due to his success, have a drive for next year. So there are several different things that work against Ocon, but I think he's just got to hope that either he or Toto Wolff can get Williams and take it from there and maybe see if he can get into a Mercedes to 2020, because I can't see Bottas being around in Mercedes much longer unless there's a dramatic change of form.
James, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us once again on the show.
No worries, thank you very much, it's been a pleasure.
James Eagles from the Checkered Flag there, and stay with us as we talk all about the British Touring Car Championship up next on Rock Sport Radio.
Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on Rock Sport Radio.
Now, the British Touring Car Championship was also in action last weekend, with the drivers heading to Silverstone, and it was another thrilling weekend of drama in the BTCC. And Sam Tordoff started from pole position. He went on to win the opener, finishing ahead of stablemate Tom Chilton, and he told BTCC.net that it wasn't easy.
Yeah, absolutely. 1-2, we can't say much better than that, can we? It was a great race. I got a good start, that was the important thing. I got across.
You did, didn't you?
I had to get across for Ricky because I know he was going to be off the marks, but thankfully my start was good. I got across, I sent him the long way and he couldn't hold on. So, and after that I thought, head down, this is it. Safety car made it interesting. I'd got the gap and suddenly I didn't have one anymore. But it made a great restart and I thought I was away again. But Tom, fair play, because considering he's got a bit of weight in the car and I've got none, he was very fast. He kept pushing. I made one mistake at Luffield and he got a bit too close for comfort, if I'm honest. And he kept me on my toes. There was no team orders. I got the message from the engineer saying, Sam, there's no team orders, so you're going to have to earn this one.
And Adam, a good win for Tordorf there, his first of the season.
Yeah, and his first podium of the season, I believe, as well. And he must have the record for the most fourth places as well, because he's finished that a lot this season. So probably one of the most difficult positions to finish in motorsport, just off that podium so many times. But finally, to get across and take the checkered flag in first, and then he was third in the next race as well. So a brilliant weekend for Sam.
Yeah, definitely, because he kind of struggled a little bit in the first couple of rounds. The Brands Hatch Indy circuit, Donington as well, didn't quite go his way, and then the fourth place finishes just started rolling in, as you mentioned there. Thruxton, every single round it was a fourth place finish. Yeah, he was in good form, definitely, but it was, like he says, it was quite nervy at the end. And that's the thing, Adam, when you're in that situation, we mentioned it there with James Eagles from the Checkered Flag about the Force India situation and them bringing in team orders. Here we are last weekend, Sam Tordorf was told just get on with it. And sometimes, it's that's the most difficult aspect, racing against your teammate as well, because yeah, you want to leave your competitor that kind of racing room, that racing gap, but when it's your stablemate alongside you and Tom Chilton, it makes it all the more dangerous. And especially when he's not been in that position so far this season, because they're fighting for a lot of points, very valuable points in all the different championships of the British Touring Cars. So that was critical that they drove a fair race. And as I said, for Sam Tordorf, obviously delighted. Yeah, and Tom Ingram won the second race of the day after going around the outside of Sam Tordorf, and that was the first time that he's been on the top step of the podium since the second race in Donington as well. And he told BTCC.net that it was all down to his team.
Look, my job is to get the most out of the car, but I can only get the most out of the car if I've got the best car around and the best opportunity, and that's what I get every single time with what Speedworks put under me. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about what we're able to do, and that takes us back in the fight.
Tom Ingram there speaking, just hearing above a very noisy car in the background there. And Adam, that's one of the things, when you're there at the track in the British Touring Car Championship, the noise is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's fantastic, especially at the start when you've got all the cars revving up and then down into the first corner of all the tracks. We had the pleasure of going to Knockhill, and it's brilliant because you do get the free races as well, so you can go to different areas and different points for overtaking or just to see the cars. So yeah, it's a terrific event, the British Touring Car Championship, and for Tom Ingram, great victory for him, you have to say as well, in terms of the championship as well, really keeping it close to Colin Turkington. 34 points now the difference, and it was a disappointing first round for Ingram, so to recover so well in that second race, huge credit to him. And as I said, now he's going to Brands Hatch again, and who knows what can happen. It's still going to be tough, but you never know with the touring cars, free races, anything can happen. Yeah, definitely, and Ingram's another one. He's been reasonably consistent over the course of the season as well. Maybe not necessarily, he's got lots of podium finishes in there as well, a couple of dodgy results that maybe haven't quite gone his way, but he's still keeping Turkington honest. We've got 3 more rounds at Brands Hatch, and as you say, who knows what could happen. Yeah, I think with the British touring cars, you sometimes forget that with the 34 points, it seems a lot with kind of just the one event to go, but you have the 3 races, and you're sometimes guilty of forgetting, it is actually 3 races, and if you think about the amount of points that are still up for grabs, anything can happen. And you're right, he has had a few disappointing results. I think the big blow really that's came recently in the championship has to be that second race at Knockhill. That was the real disaster, not only for Tom Ingram but also Ashley Sutton, who would have been hoping for a good result there. And obviously because that happened in race 2, that affects him in race 3, and he's not able to do a lot. So that's 2 races where he's failing to score points. But as I said, good recovery in Silverstone, and he'll be going to Brands Hatch with the kind of attitude that he's got nothing to lose, does he? 34 points behind. Turkington's the man that's got to deliver. Yeah, and now moving on to the final round of the event last weekend, it was Scottish driver Aidan Moffat who took his first win of the season, and get this, the 16th different race winner in the BTCC this year. He started from pole position and managed to fend off both Tom Chilton and Colin Turkington, and he said that it was his best win yet.
Yeah, I mean, you never forget your first win. The win at Brands last year, the way we've done it and the conditions are amazing wins. But that's the most special win I've had. To kind of come to a track after such a run of bad performances is the only way to put it for myself. To come back from that, and the guys and the girls in the team are always doing everything they can. And so to kind of reward them again after the last few meetings when they're doing their job and I'm letting them down, I guess. So I put in a lot of work for this weekend. I've done things I've not done before, and I learned at Keenan, I went and seen her, done mind prep and stuff I never really thought about before, just trying everything I could and working closely with Alan Menu, my engineer Federico and Chaz. We've been working very closely, looking at data, and it makes it a very special one because it's one we had to work so hard for.
And Adam, it's interesting to hear Moffat talk about the ways he's trying to improve off the track there as well, bringing in a mind coach and things like that. What sort of impact do you think that would have for a driver?
Well, certainly not just in motorsport, but in all different sports now, the kind of mental aspects being taken a lot more serious, and the advantages that you can actually see on track from doing the different off-track experiences like the mental coaching, then that's going to help a driver immensely. And I think for so long, you never really kind of thought about stuff like that, but it's just that, a tenth of a second. It's those kind of things that you aim to try and find as a driver, and by bringing in someone like that, Aidan Moffat's given himself that opportunity of doing it, and a great result for Aidan Moffat, you have to say. He mentioned there, didn't he, about how tough times it had been, because it has really been a disappointing season overall for Aidan, and we had that good result in Donington with the double podium there, but since then there's not been a lot to shout about. Obviously you could argue he was helped massively with the way the grid worked out for race 3, but you've still got to go out there and deliver, and he did that tremendously.
So Adam, how are the championship standings shaping up ahead of this season finale at Brands Hatch?
Yep, so we've got Colin Turkington on 300 points. Tom Ingram, he's 34 back in 266. And you've got Tom Chilton on 236. And then you've got Ash Sutton, 227. And also on the same figure as Adam Morgan.
And reigning champion Ash Sutton won't retain his title. He's now out of the running, which is a shame, Adam, because he had a pretty strong fight back there as well in the latter part of the season.
He certainly did. Picked up a lot of race victories. That double at Croft, really the kind of stepping stone to help his season progress from there. Then got another one in the next event. It's Netterton, and again winning at Rockingham, winning at Knockhill, and again it's that second race at Knockhill, isn't it? It's cost him that disqualification. Could have been 2 wins there, and what a drive, I have to say, in race 3 at Knockhill. We were there that day because he was right at the back to finish 8th. These touring cars are big machines, difficult to overtake. Certainly driver of the day for me at Knockhill that day. And unfortunately Silverstone, I think the whole weekend just didn't go well for him, did it? No, it's not the results he's needing if he's going to put himself in the mix for that championship finale at Brands Hatch.
Now, moving on to the world of rally, and we were treated to a dramatic event in Turkey last weekend, with Ott Tanak taking his 3rd win in as many events. Now, joining us on pole position to talk more about this is, of course, rally expert David Halley. And David, I'm not too sure where to start with this one, to be honest with you, because that was one of the most entertaining rallies of the season.
I did say it would be a rally of attrition, and that's exactly how it panned out. We talked before about Tanak and the rest of the Toyota drivers running the older spec engine, which was less powerful. On Friday afternoon, you wouldn't have guessed that Tanak was going to end up the winner. He was unhappy with the car, he was unhappy with the handling of the car, he was unhappy with the stages. He just wasn't in a very happy place. But as the weekend went on and others threw their cars at the scenery, or the cars failed under the immense pressure of the horrible conditions underfoot, he suddenly appeared at the top of the tree, and he's now right in the championship hunt in 2nd place ahead of Sebastian Ogier, and it's all looking very juicy for the end of the season.
Absolutely, and Tanak's now just 13 points behind Thierry Neuville as well. I mean, you could argue that he had a little bit of luck come his way last weekend, but you know what, you've got to be there to pick up the pieces, and Tanak did just that.
Absolutely, he drove with his head. He knew the car wasn't quick enough in that specification to challenge Thierry Neuville and Seb Ogier, but he just plugged away at it, and the second run on the stages, they were like the surface of the moon, some of them. They were just so rocky and horrible that various drivers, well, most of the drivers other than Tanak, were having bits falling off the car.
Yeah, definitely, and with Jari-Matti Latvala finishing 2nd as well, it's a pretty strong finish, and I feel a bit bad for almost... when they were talking of changing the engines and what have you, we're kind of writing them off a little bit, but fair play to them.
Well, we said at the time that this specification of engine, they've possibly been very clever in that the older specification of engine runs a little bit cooler, although very near the top of the capacity of the cooling system. Now, Turkey's a hot place, so to run the lesser spec engine going for reliability and using the strength of the car to get through where others were trying very hard and failing.
Now, David, Hyundai, their cars look quite strong in the early stages, but ultimately it was a disappointing point haul for them, and one I wonder whether they could live to regret in the Manufacturers' Championship.
Absolutely. Terry Neuville suffered a broken suspension when bits of suspension appeared through the bonnet, which is never a good sign. So he was out early on, came back for the last day to win maximum power stage points to add to his championship points haul. But yes, he missed out. Seb Ogier had a suspension problem. He managed to get it fixed by the side of the road, and then uncharacteristically fell off the road later in the day, and he managed to pick up 1 point and then second place in the power stage, so they came out even Stevens, but a long way behind the points that Tanak picked up.
Hi David, Adam here. M Sports' Elvin Evans, he had a tough weekend and his intercom with his co-driver failed early on before going on to suffer mechanical problems. What do you do in that situation when you can't talk to your co-driver?
You have to drive it by as you see it. You've driven the road slowly, so you can have a rough idea where you are, and rough being exactly the operative word in Turkey. But you just have to drive it as you can see it. The co-driver can occasionally indicate with his hand the direction of the next corner, but the co-driver sits down and slightly further back than the driver, so it's very difficult for the driver to see hand signals. So it's a real problem. But Elvin knew he had problems, and then when Ogier had his broken suspension, Elvin's a very good mechanic. He worked as a mechanic at M Sport before getting the drive. He was there guiding operations, and when they got Sebastian's car back to service, Elvin actually serviced his own car to allow his mechanics to help Ogier's mechanics change the front of the car. The front subframes, the gearbox and all the suspension was changed, so they had more mechanics on Seb's car, and there's Elfin lying under his own car doing his own servicing.
Wow, very kind of him. David, I felt quite sorry for Mads Osberg because he started strongly for Citroën but ran into trouble in stage 6.
Yes, the Citroëns, we spoke again about them having good pace on the gravel, which we hoped would carry over from Finland. They had failed miserably in tarmac spec in Germany. It looked good for them at the very early stages of the event. They were all going well. Then Osberg had his problem, and unfortunately Mr. Breen toasted his car.
And on day 2, championship leader Terry Neuville suffered suspension problems, as you mentioned there, but he managed to get the car going again. David, could you just explain how important it is for the drivers and co-drivers to be able to fix a problem like that on the road?
It's very important. They are only allowed to work the car themselves. They are only allowed to fit parts that they are carrying in the car at the time of the event. Many, many years ago in the world of rallying, you used to find the half-shaft tree or the spare wheel bush where a service crew had deposited a spare part that might be necessary. These days it's very much tighter controlled. They can only fit the part in the car, and being able to do that. And Sebastian Ogier was working on his own car. Terry Neuville, he swapped suspension from the back to the front to try and get going again. Ultimately didn't work for him. He had to retire for the day and park it up and get the mechanics to deal with it. Ogier got his car going using a variety of devices, including 3 big rocks that he had lying around to beat the suspension back into line, and he went and then set the fastest time on the next stage. So he was confident in his repairs, but ultimately he just misheard a pace note and put her into a tree.
Yeah, and David Ogier's called that one of the most silly mistakes that he's had in his career, but how costly do you think that one will prove to be?
Could be very costly. With Terry Neuville on Rally 2 and effectively out of the points, with Sebastian there or thereabouts, he was very near to the front leading and fighting for the lead. He could have taken a massive haul of points and brought himself back into contention, but yes, a silly slide into a tree and it all goes away.
And David, you mentioned Craig Breen toasting his car his weekend over in dramatic fashion. Just talk us through what happened there.
Well, the problem with it's a bizarre scenario, but rally cars are now not allowed to use aircraft-style extinguishants. We have to use what is effectively soapy water. And when you're dealing with a fuel and the brake fluids and the oils in a rally car and the carbon fibre panels, once they take hold and the fire takes hold on those, they're incredibly difficult to put out. And you get a fire at the back and it just works its way forward through the car, and you just have to leave the car and walk away.
And David, you know, when Breen was driving that car, there was a lot of smoke initially coming through, and the instinct seemed to be, you know, just carry on and we'll get through it. But then all of a sudden, it's like you say there, just how quickly the fire spreads, and you've just got to get out.
Absolutely. I don't know what the actual cause of the smoke was. You've got a lot of things running around the back of the car. There's oil, obviously, in the differential that comes out into a diff cooler. The suspension itself contains oil, so that again can mist up and come out of the dampers if the damper fails. And there's brake fluid back there as well. So any one of these is highly flammable, and once it starts, it's very difficult to put it out. You drive quickly in the hope that it gets blown out by the wind, but it doesn't always happen that way. And once it starts working its way through the car, there is absolutely nothing you can do. It's get out and watch it burn.
And David, we're now in a position where we've got a three-way fight for this driver's title, and I get the feeling that this is an important one for the sport, given that there are just 4 manufacturers at the moment.
Absolutely. It's very important, and it's making an exciting season out of it. Now, I'm sure all 3 of them would rather have it won by this stage in the season, but they are all relishing the fight. They're enjoying the fact that they're able to have a good fight amongst themselves, and the stakes are creeping in.
But how do you think Neuville will be feeling at the moment, though? Because, I mean, that gap that he has at the top, you know, just 13 points, it's not the biggest of gaps, David.
It's not, and it's actually he's got to watch out for, because next time round in the UK, Tanak's got his fast engine back again. It won't be very hot because it's October in the UK, so it's bound to be cold and wet. So Tanak will be looking for 4 in a row, and that will really put the pressure on the top of that championship.
David, in motorsport we talk a lot about momentum. How important is it for momentum in rally? Because Ogier seems to be just lagging behind a little bit, I think. You know, what does he need to do to get himself back in contention here?
Ogier is very good at producing a Super Saturday, one of those ones where running near the front of the event, you lose a little bit of time, you get a little bit further down, and then Saturday morning he comes out his bed, bright as a button, and puts in some phenomenally quick times. He's done that, but the others have matched him, and that's where the difference is, that he's not king of the pile necessarily anymore. His peers around about him and are seeing him as a target that they can achieve. And obviously Tanak ran with him last year in the M Sport team. Tanak took a lot from how Ogier operates and has taken that to Toyota and has learned his trade. So he is the man that's on the roll at the moment. 4 in a row is a distinct possibility, but the stages of Wales have a habit of also throwing up some strange results as well.
Now, David, one story I want to get your thoughts on. Ogier, of course, being linked with a move away from M Sport. Some sources saying that he could sign a 3-year deal with Citroën. David, what's the appeal for Ogier to go back there? Of course, yes, he's raced under the Citroën banner previously, but he's come to the end of his career now as well, and Citroën, you know, I mean, they could pull it out of the bag next year potentially, you know, who knows what could happen, but, you know, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there to get them into real championship contention, in my opinion.
Earlier in the season we talked about this, and the feeling was, and the information from Sebastian at that point was, that he did not want to start again and mould a team round about it. He's done around him. He's done that with M Sport. He's got the backing of Malcolm and all the team at M Sport. And I don't know whether Citroën think they can get him, but I don't. I will still be surprised if he ends up at Citroën. And I'm wrong regularly, as we know, particularly when it comes to guessing results. But I I just don't see it unless they're offering him so much money that he thinks it's worth his while. But at his stage in the game, having to go to a new team that's not performing well, having to bring the team together and getting them to work, he left under a bit of a cloud last time because he clashed with the other Sebastian. I'm not sure. There's also talk of them approaching Esa-Pekka Lappi, who's been very quick in the Toyota this year. I don't know whether a large lump of money would attract that young man to go to Citroën when the Toyota's looking so good. But again, with Esa-Pekka Lappi's situation, he's unlikely to be in a championship position with Ott Tanak there, who's become their number one driver. So he maybe feels that going to another team might suit him. I just don't see it suiting Seb Ogier. I don't get it at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and one that I'm sure we'll talk about much more between now and the end of the season, David. Thanks very much as always for your time here on Rock Sport Radio.
No problem, gentlemen.
Rally expert David Halley there. Now, MotoGP head to Aragon for the 14th round of this year's championship. Marc Marquez goes into the weekend with a 67-point lead at the top of the standings, and I'm delighted to say that joining us to talk more about the race this weekend is Lewis Duncan from Motorsport Week. And Lewis, with only 5 races remaining, it's fair to say that this is Marquez's to lose.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, I think that's very much a fair assessment that this is in Marc Marquez's hand. 67-point lead in the championship over Andrea Dovizioso. As you say, if he wins this Grand Prix at Aragon and Dovizioso is not second, then Marquez goes to the next round in Thailand with his first chance at winning the championship, his 5th World Championship in the Premier class. And he's in such a wonderful position because he hasn't won a Grand Prix since Germany before the summer break, but he's thereabouts on the podium, and even with the Ducati pace being what it is right now, he doesn't need to win any races. So Marquez comes into Aragon with the comfortable task of just getting through the weekend and knowing that the pace will be there in the Honda, and if he comes out with the podium, that's all he needs.
But Lewis, I almost wonder in a strange sort of way, if Marquez does begin to just sit off a little bit, and yes, of course, he's always, he's got so many podiums over the course of this season, but, see, if in motorsport, if you begin to just sit off a little bit, maybe that's when the others can creep in there. So I almost wonder if he does have to just continue, being as aggressive as he has been this season.
Well, it's very much Marc Marquez's style to push. We see it time and time again. Even when the bike's there, when he feels comfortable on the bike, he will push. He will try and fight for the win. But we saw. You think back to last year at Valencia, the finale, when the championship. Okay, he had a comfortable margin over Dovizioso then, but it still wasn't finished, and he decided to sit behind Zarco for a little while, run Zarco's pace. He said he nearly crashed a few times because he was riding within himself, and that's not Marquez's style. So yeah, right, it's certainly Marquez's way to go out and push if the bike's there, but he also knows that if he isn't able to win this race, then settling for a podium isn't a disaster. He knows he's going to be at minimum, certainly around Aragon, top 3. It's a track he loves, it's a track he's great at, so it very much depends on how the weekend starts off. He's a guy that from all of Friday pretty much sets up the bike for the race, doesn't really put in a time attack until Saturday, and it's usually then where he knows what the situation will be come Sunday, if he can fight for the victory. If not, if he can, you can expect to be up the front, but as I say, it's when it comes to warfare with what we expect to be the 2 Ducatis again, if he can't get the measure of them comfortably enough, he'll just settle for the podium, and even then, losing 5 points in Dovizioso isn't a major disaster.
Hi Lewis, Adam here. Dovizioso's teammate Jorge Lorenzo, he had a disappointing end to his race in San Marino. How desperate will he be to bounce back and finish ahead of Dovizioso not only this weekend but in the championship before he departs to Honda?
Well, this is the thing now, Adam. It's Ducati have accepted that the championship is pretty much over. I mean, yes, MotoGP, it's unpredictable and anything can happen in it, but with the form Marquez is on, it's pretty much a certainty that this championship battle now is for second place. And it was a big error Lorenzo made at Misano. He had the pace to put Dovizioso under pressure in those final few laps, which front end crashed out. He blamed the front tyre on that being a bit too hard for his liking. So 30-point deficit. He's not going to overhaul Dovizioso this weekend, but he'll certainly want to close that up, as you say. And it's Aragon this weekend will be interesting from Ducati's standpoint, because they're adamant that the bike is pretty much solid everywhere they go, and that's true if you look at races earlier in the season like Jerez, Le Mans, Sachsenring, even tracks that Ducati typically struggled at. The fact that they've got the pace. I mean, Misano was a perfect example of that. Lorenzo lap record in qualifying, Dovizioso was able to convincingly win that race. The Ducati is now the package that they've always looked for. It's consistent and it's quick everywhere. Aragon was always a problem circuit. If you remember, Dovizioso last year was 7th behind even Alvaro Bautista on the year-old Aspar Ducati. This will be an interesting weekend from that point of view. See what just where Ducati are now with the improvements they've made to the bike, and certainly that'll have a factor in the Dovizioso versus Lorenzo War. As you say, Lorenzo very much keen to make sure he leaves Ducati questioning their decision to not retain him for the next 2 years, something that they will be a burning question over the winter as he assimilates himself into Honda.
And Valentino Rossi, he's third in the championship with his Yamaha teammate Maverick Vinales fifth, but they haven't won a race all year and since Assen last year. So what's gone wrong for them this year?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This weekend, Yamaha are in real danger of entering its longest losing streak since it joined the Premier Class of the Grand Prix World Championship back in 1973. This is how dire the situation is at Yamaha right now. The problems have been related to the electronics. The electronics have been the big issue, although in recent races Rossi's now come out and said, well, perhaps it's the engine, and now there's been some talk that perhaps Yamaha could do something radical over the winter with the engine and change to a V4, which is what Honda and Ducati run, but that would be a big gamble in itself. This weekend, Aragon again. It's not a great track for Yamaha, even when they haven't been in such strife as they are now. But Maverick Vinales was confident after Misano, despite his slump in form in the race. He was quick all weekend, front row in qualifying. He feels that the Misano race didn't show Yamaha's potential. He feels they have made a step forward with the electronics in a test at Misano before the race, and Aragon as well. Rossi was a bit more pessimistic about his chances at Aragon. The test for him wasn't so great, and I mean, Misano was a really humbling experience for him. 19 seconds off of the victory on home soil in 7th. So this is a crucial weekend for Yamaha. They are in danger of entering that longest losing streak in its history, and it's hard to see them stopping that. But the noise that Vinales has made today in the Aragon press conference certainly is a little bit more optimistic to what it has been in recent races. I mean, if you think back to Austria, when Yamaha management publicly apologised to both its riders for how poor its form was, this is certainly a step in the right direction.
And let's talk about Britain's Cal Crutchlow. He got a podium last time out, only his second of the year, but do you think that podium will give him a lot of confidence for the rest of the season?
I think so. Cal's always been a confident rider. He's always been adamant he is the second best rider on a Honda, and to his credit, he's spot on. He admits himself there's been opportunities this year for more podiums that he's missed. And the last time out, he was 4th before Lorenzo crashed, but you've got to be there, and his pace all weekend, Crutchlow, was great, and he's been on a real purple patches. Has Cal on that Honda? I mean, since the summer break, he's been in the top 5 in all races. So I think it'll definitely give him confidence. But the problem Crutchlow has is that he's he's on a factory-supported bike, but he's not quite on the same level as Marquez and as Pedrosa, and this is something he's asked Honda for. He needs a little bit more support so he can aid them in their fight against Ducati. And of course, from Crutchell's point of view, absolute machine parity with the factory riders would obviously mean more chances for a podium.
And just finally, Lewis, is there anyone else we should be keeping an eye on this weekend?
Well, going back to what we're talking about, Ducati, the ones you can always kind of look out for as being a bit of a barometer in where Ducati are pace-wise is the Pramac team. Danilo Petrucci, of course, on a GP18 like Dovizioso and Lorenzo. But Jack Miller, I mean, last time out at Misano, front row in qualifying, was running up in those podium positions earlier on before he crashed out. So if Ducati really are on sort of the kind of form they expect to be at Aragon, you can expect to see certainly Miller up there, Petrucci as well. And Alvaro Bautista, you mentioned him, he beat Dovizioso last year. He's been on a real decent run of form. He's eager to leave MotoGP with a decent set of results before he goes towards Superbikes next year. And I think Alex Rins as well. Alex had a really good outing at Misano, and this is gambled on the soft tyres in the heat, and he made it work for him. He came out with a fourth from that race. So. And Aragon home circuit for Rins, and his comments after Misano suggested he's quite confident for how the bike will perform around Aragon. So certainly Rins on the Suzuki would be another one to keep an eye on.
Great stuff, Lewis. Thanks very much for joining us on the show and talking all things MotoGP.
No problem.
Lewis Duncan from Motorsport Week there. Now, Adam, we've got time for just a very quick Scottish Motorsport roundup on the show, and we've talked about this battle in the Drivers' Championship in the DTM quite a lot this season. Paul di Resta, of course, he's right up there. He's just 2 points behind his Mercedes teammate Gary Paffett as we head to the Red Bull Ring for the penultimate event of the season. So, what does di Resta need to do in order to win this one, Adam? Because I get the impression this is going to be absolutely vital.
Yeah, well, it's been an incredible end to the DTM season, because earlier on the season it was looking as if Gary Paffett was really on course to win the title, but Paul di Resta certainly came back into the fray, and that was helped enormously by back-to-back wins. He won the second race at Brands Hatch and then won the first race at Misano. Disappointing result for di Resta last time out at the Nürburgring, because he was leading the championship but lost the lead after failing to score in the first race. Gary Paffett third and fifth. Di Resta did get second place in the second race, but unfortunately not enough to hold on to the championship. So just two behind the two British drivers. It's going to be fantastic this weekend in the Red Bull Ring, and qualifying is going to be critical on both days.
And Scottish driver Johnny Adam is aiming to take his third British GT3 title this weekend as well.
Yeah, he could become the first ever to win 3 championships, and with 3 different teams and teammates if he and Flick Hay succeed on Sunday. There's a couple of other Scots to keep an eye on as well. Graham Davidson is racing in another Aston Martin. Ian Logie is taking part in his Bentley Continental GT3. In the GT4 category, Daniel Mackay and Finlay Hutchinson are going for class honours on their McLaren 570S, and 17-year-old Dean McDonald is racing in the stellar performance Toyota GT86.
And Gordy Much, he's in action this weekend as well for Fox Motorsport in the Ginetta GT5 Challenge.
Yeah, we were speaking to Gordy in the show a few weeks ago after he took his best ever result in the series last time out in Knockhill. He's been testing at Donington ahead of the event, and this weekend he's topped the timesheets as well. And it's hard to believe Gordy's just 16 years old as well. Definitely a driver with a promising future. And we'll be following a story with interest on pole position. Hopefully have him back on the show.
Yeah, and just finally, Scottish team Écurie Écosse, they're back in action this weekend as well.
Yep, Colin Noble and Écurie Écosse are heading to Belgium this weekend to race at Spa Water Track. Penultimate round of the European Le Mans Series.
Alright, now it's time for this.
Final lap on pole position on Rock Sport Radio.
Yes, it's that time of the show, Adam, as you tell us 6 stories from the world of motorsport this week in just 60 seconds. And you've been on a good run of form, Adam, so let's see how you get on this time round, because your time starts now.
Mercedes F1 boss Toto Wolff has said Esteban Ocon will not be released from the Mercedes driver programme in a million years. The Frenchman faced a battle to stay on the grid in 2019 with other teams rejecting him due to his links with the German manufacturer. Jenson Button won his first Super GT race last weekend at Sugo alongside co-driver Naoki Yamamoto. The result means the 2009 F1 World Champion is now top of the standings after 6 rounds. Formula 2 driver Alexander Albon has signed for Nissan Edams for the upcoming Formula E season. He'll partner 2015-16 champion Sebastian Buemi at the team. 5-time World Rally champion Sébastien Ogier will make his DTM debut this weekend at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. The Frenchman will drive for Mercedes and will be the first guest driver since Alex Zanardi, who finished 5th for BMW back in Misano. The Fuji round of the 2019-20 World Endurance Championship has been moved forward a week to avoid a clash with the Japanese Grand Prix. And finally, congratulations to Scott Dixon, who won his 5th IndyCar title at last weekend's season finale in Sonoma. He finished the race in 2nd, which was good enough to see him win the championship ahead of Alexander Rossi.
Well done, Adam. The run continues. Doing pretty well here.
It does. Shame Sebastian Vettel can't find this form at the moment.
I tell you what, we'll end on that. What was it Jeremy Clarkson said? And on that bombshell, we'll end on that. That's all we've got time for on Pole Position this week, unfortunately. But we'll be back from 8 o'clock next Thursday night to do it all again. My thanks to Adam, to our guests, and to you for listening as well. And stick around for Matt Finlay up next on Rock Sport Radio.
Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on Rock Sport Radio.